Welcome to a random parking lot in the town of Wakkanai, which is near the northernmost tip of Hokkaido / Japan. Why am I here? Well, I bought this nice NC Mazda MX-5 last year, and to celebrate my 1-year ownership of the car, I decided to take an epic road trip from Tokyo up to the northern tip of Japan. Also, because a lot of people ask, this isn't a COVID mask, it's a plausible deniability mask. Yeah, deal with it. This is a 2005 Mazda Roadster. The naming and the year thing is a bit different in Japan, obviously. I bought this last year at the end of August for about 1.1 million yen, all taxes and everything included, which is less than 8,000 US dollars, so I think that was a good deal. This is the VS trim. The VS trim is kind of like the Grand Touring trim in the US, so this has leather seats, seat heaters, and it has a cloth roof, which I think is very important. The vinyl roofs on old NCs always crack, they kind of creak as they open and close, and it's actually louder as you cruise down the street. This actual fabric cloth top is quieter, and because it's this fabric that doesn't fold and crack, it's an 18-year-old roof and it's still doing all right. So I bought this car not from a dealer, but a private mechanic, and he specializes in these Mazda Roadsters. And according to him, he bought this off the previous owner because it was just sitting around for a while, and he changed everything that needed changing and changed all the fluids out and just kind of breathed new life into this car. And I could tell it was sitting for a while when I first bought it because everything just felt stiff, especially the gear shift. But after about 1,000 kilometers, everything started loosening up and just started feeling better and better and better. The engine revved cleaner, the shifts were just really crisp, and it just started driving incredibly well. So originally I drove an ND MX-5, and I really liked it and I wanted to get one. However, I started looking at prices for them, and even a used one was a bit out of my budget. So then I decided to look at this third generation NC. And a lot of people say this is the wrong Miata to buy, and you're better off with the first, second, or fourth generation, just never get the third generation. And you know what? It's been a year owning this car, and I have zero regrets about getting an NC instead of saving up some extra money to get an ND. And there's a few reasons for that. First and foremost, it's a bigger car, and this is my only car. So having that little bit of extra space in the cabin, a bit of extra space in the trunk, it goes a long way to making this a bit more of a practical proposition. So a funny thing about the NC is that it gets kind of a lot of hate on the internet and elsewhere for a few reasons that people always state. And interestingly, it's for those reasons that I actually really like this car. So the first thing that people complain about is the suspension. Oh, it's riding too high, it's too soft, it rolls a lot. This is more of a GT car instead of a real sports car. Well, right now I'm doing a grand tour, and even if that was true, I'm very happy it's kind of like a GT car, because I just did thousands of kilometers, not tired, I haven't been shaken to a point where my bones have turned to dust. It's a nice and comfortable car. And why would you complain about a comfortable car? I don't understand why people are like that. They're like, oh, I'm not deaf and my back doesn't hurt. It's not a real sports car. What? Okay. But yeah, it's a very comfortable ride. I do enjoy that. the ride height being a bit taller, some people probably don't know this. The reason why Mazda makes the ride height a bit taller is they know they have some customers in Japan who need to put snow chains on their car because we have 4 seasons here, and they want to give you that bit of clearance to more easily get those snow chains. And what that also means is you can clear a lot of things a lot more easily. Everyone keeps thinking that Japan has glass smooth roads everywhere. That's far from the truth. Quite a few roads here are indeed glass smooth, but quite a lot more look like they've been plowed. So having the taller ride height and the softer suspension means you do not have to suffer over those roads. And it's these rougher roads outside of Tokyo, those are the ones you want to be driving on because those are the fun ones. And why have a really hard suspension when once you get to these fun roads that you actually want to be driving on, you just go like, ah, God, the suspension's too hard, and you're bouncing everywhere, and your handling is actually worse because you're not gripping the road as well. So this car hasn't been completely problem-free. I've had all of the common problems with the NC Roadsters. First and foremost, the thermostat went around winter of last year. It was kind of stuck open a bit, so the engine was constantly on cold during winter. That was a relatively cheap fix, so it was about 8,000 yen to get the thermostat swapped out, and then everything's been fine since then. I had a O-ring for the air conditioner start leaking coolant out or refrigerant out, and that, like, the part was cheap, the labor wasn't expensive. However, recharging all the refrigerant into the air conditioner cost quite a bit, so I think it was about 20,000 yen at the end of the day to do that job. Let's see, other than that, it's just been little niggles here and there, mainly with the soft top. Like the latch kind of got loose here, and then you just kind of tighten it, and some of the joints in the sort of structure started to squeak a lot, so just oil those up. And then the biggest problem was the drain hole on the driver's side clogged up in the middle of heavy rain, and I kind of just left the car out, got back in the morning, and noticed there was a pond below the driver's seat that I need to clear out. Fortunately, I since got the drain cleared out, and everything's been fine since then. And this is a 18-year-old soft top. I'm surprised it's lasted as well as it has. I forgot to mention that this car also has other common NC things, like the seatbelt retractor being on strike, and something in the shift mechanism wore down, and if you push hard to the left, the car will not go into first, but it will if you push gently to the left. Both things you easily get used to. So in terms of cost of ownership, the biggest cost is obviously parking in Tokyo. You're lucky to get away with 20,000 yen a month, which is what I pay, and that's for one of those giant elevator carousel parking lot type of things. I don't care what the exchange rate is anymore. In terms of cost of living, that'd be the equivalent of paying $200 a month for parking in the US, and that's a lot of money. On top of that, this car doesn't really need much. It just needs basic oil changes, and the mechanic I bought this car from for 30,000 yen, let's just call it $300, he gives me a service pack for 2 years, and every 6 months he'll change the oil, check everything, and I thought that was a pretty good deal. And then in terms of fuel consumption, around town, I mean, there's a traffic light every 100 meters, and you can't really get up to speed, etc. Okay. But even then, I get about 25 miles per gallon, roughly 10 kilometers per liter. Then on the highway, this thing magically gets over 17 kilometers per liter or 40 miles per gallon, which I find amazing.
およそ300
So one of the interesting things about this car is the image it has. It was kind of a culture shock thing for me because in the US and the UK, this is seen as like a girl's car, a hairdresser's car. That's the stereotype. But in Japan, this is seen as a true sports car. And the image of the owners would be that of a sensei. So a doctor, a lawyer, or a professor of some sort. But it's kind of like the elder gentleman with graying hair type of doctor, but still, that's a much better image than a hairdresser. On top of that, I've gotten compliments about this car. Like, kids pass by and they'll be like, "Hey, kakkoi," which means, oh, very cool. I've had a lot of people just say, "Wow, that's a really cool car." And, like, for me, from being from the US, I was like, what? No one ever says a Miata's cool. But, this is Japan, it's different. I think that's fun. And another bit of trivia is the Drift King, Keiichi Tsuchiya. He actually said that this NC is his favorite MX-5. And you know what? His opinion's better than mine, and I will defer to him. Another complaint people have about MX-5 slash Miatas slash Roadsters is the fact that there's not that much firepower under the hood. This particular car has a 2-liter, 170 metric horsepower engine, and from a Japan perspective, this car is quick. It has more than enough power to do anything. Does it feel like lightning fast? Of course not. But compared to other cars on the road in Japan, it is significantly faster. And on top of that, the speed limits here are so ridiculously low. This is all the power you're ever going to need, unless you feel like going to jail and losing your license. To give you an example of how ridiculously low the speed limits can be in Japan, I got a speeding ticket where I was 2 kilometers an hour away from losing my license. And do you want to guess how fast I was going? In miles per hour, those of you in the US will start to laugh, I was going 40 miles per hour. 1 more mile an hour and I would have lost my license. Didn't realize that road had such a low speed limit, and there happened to be a police trap waiting for me. So, if you ever wonder why I don't floor it on these videos, the speed limits here are really low. So is there anything I don't like about this car? And the answer is yes. I'm not going to say the usual cliche boring things like, oh, it's too small, it only has 2 seats. It's like, we all know that. You buy this car knowing that. So in terms of genuine things I don't like, it's all here. So there's a bit of like a transmission tunnel bump or something in the footwell, so your foot kind of can't rest properly. Like, you can't do this business. You have to rest your foot completely against the dead pedal, but it is kind of at an angle as well. Let's see, what else? Yeah, the pedals are a bit offset, like this way, so the first time I got in the car, I was like, wait, what's going on here? Because you're not completely straight. But you get used to that very quickly, and it's not too big of a problem. The other thing, it's probably not unique to this car, it's to all sports cars, but because of the seating position, your right foot's kind of resting like this the entire time, and if you're not wearing thickly cushioned shoes, and you're wearing like a thin-soled driving shoe, like a Converse All-Star, the bottom right of your heel starts to just get sore after long drives. Other than that, I don't really have any complaints about this car. I mean, if anything I was going to complain about is just stuff that you knew when you were buying the car because it's a convertible. It's like, oh, okay, can't put it to the car wash. The automatic car washes, oh, it only has 2 seats. Like, we all know that. You buy this car knowing that. Of course, tight mountain roads are where MX-5s really shine. But I have found this car fun even in the city simply because the manual gearbox is just so lovely to use between traffic lights. But naturally, of course, out on roads like this, the fun really multiplies. Like, personally, I'm not a competitive driver. I don't care about speed and lap times, but I do like a car that has good feel to it. And the good news is the NC happens to be new enough to be safe and comfortable, but just old enough to still have hydraulic power steering, which alone, in my book, makes this car that bit better than the new ND. I mean, all of the driver inputs, like the brake pedal, the weight of the clutch, the gas pedal, and the steering, they're all things of beauty, and I love it. I love driving this car, especially around roads like this. And unfortunately, since I got used to how nice this car drives, I actually stopped enjoying driving other cars I used to like the Mazda 2, for example. When I first got this car, I took it to a mountain road on the edge of Tokyo, which had freshly paved, smooth roads. And, you know, as you drive around, the car guy in me wanted to get like a nice set of coilovers to quote unquote unlock the handling potential of this car, like people on Miata forums like to say, and, you know, reduce the body roll. And I was like curious, how can I make this car an even better performer? But that feeling changed very quickly. So I started taking this car to mountain roads further in the countryside, and the soft setup of the suspension just made sense because the roads outside of Tokyo are much worse, and they have all sorts of bumps and like all sorts of craziness going on. On top of that, like, I scraped the nose of the lowered ND and the GT86 I rented in the past when I took the car out into the mountains. But this car, because of the higher ride height that people complain about, I haven't scraped on anything yet. Overall, like, the softer suspension allows the car to absorb the uneven pavement really well, like on roads like this. And the car feels like it's dancing and flowing with the road rather than fighting it, and that's pretty much why it's set up this way. A lot of people complain that, you know, for track use, the stock suspension is not great, and that's true. And they're wondering why Mazda's engineers set the car up this way, and they were probably thinking of roads like this, and in my opinion, they were right to do that. I mean, yeah, the car still rolls a lot in the corners like all stock MX-5s, but I've learned that the roll is not something to be feared. The car kind of rolls and sets in a confidence-inspiring manner, unlike a cheap hatchback that rolls and makes you go, like, I actually like the roll in this car because it makes the car feel faster than it really is in the corners, and to me, that's fun. I mean, in summary, the driving experience of this car is that of just fun. It's not a serious car. It doesn't try to shave seconds off your lap time. It's just a car that you drive for fun. And it really delivers on that. And, you know, it may not be set up to blitz circuits from the factory, but out on these twisty mountain roads with broken pavement, it's fantastic. In terms of long-term plans, I just want to keep this car alive for as long as possible. And I love driving it. It's a luxury to have a car in Tokyo. So hopefully my financial situation is stable where I can keep this car for until they get outlawed by Japan. Because these are just wonderful cars. Like, I absolutely love this car. I've completely bonded with this car. And I don't ever want to see it go. I kind of want to keep driving this until either it or I die.